You're tuned in to Beyond the Known.
In 1993, a small robot was sent deep inside the Great Pyramid, down a narrow shaft never meant for human passage. It reached a sealed door, one that hadn't been opened in 4,500 years. Behind it, another chamber, another mystery. But the deeper we look, the more the pyramid resists explanation. Was it ever just a tomb, or something much, much more?
Wow. That really sets the scene, doesn't it? That sense of mystery, something hidden just beyond reach.
It absolutely does, and that's exactly what we're getting into today.
We are taking on one of the biggest enigmas out there, the Great Pyramid of Giza. We've gathered a whole stack of research, everything from ancient texts to brand new radar scans.
The goal is really to piece together what this incredible monument might actually be. We'll look at the standard views, the really out there theories, everything.
Trying to get past the usual noise and find those nuggets that really make you think, okay, that's interesting, so you feel like you've really got a handle on it.
Exactly. We'll explore perspectives from mainstream Egyptology, but also those challenging ideas that just won't go away. It's about digging into those details that keep researchers, and frankly us, completely hooked.
All right, let's start with the basics, just setting the stage. The Great Pyramid. I mean, it's not just old, it's ancient on a scale that's hard to grasp.
It really is. We're talking over 4,500 years ago, and some people think maybe even older than that.
And the size.
Yeah.
It's made of, over 2.3 million stone blocks?
Limestone, mostly. And yeah, 2.3 million is the number usually cited. And the precision they were cut with. It's remarkable.
But it's the weight that gets me. Some of those blocks. Up to 80 tons?
80 tons.
Okay, wait, 80 tons. I struggle moving furniture. How on earth, how do conventional explanations even begin to tackle moving something like that back then?
It is genuinely staggering. Think about it. 80 tons is heavier than a modern battle tank, or like 12 large elephants. And they didn't just move one. They quarried them, shaped them, transported them miles, and then lifted them hundreds of feet in the air.
Without steel cables, without hydraulics.
Exactly. The traditional view credits Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, and we actually have some pretty solid evidence for that time frame.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, the biggest find was in 2013 at Wadi El Jarf. They found these ancient papyri, the oldest ever discovered in Egypt.
And they mentioned the pyramid?
Explicitly. There's a logbook kept by an official named Mirror. It's dated to the 27th year of Khufu's reign, and it details the work. Transporting limestone blocks from Tura to Giza. It's like finding the project manager's daily diary from 4,500 years ago.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty direct evidence for Khufu's time.
Yeah.
But it's not just the size and age, the precision, right? The alignment.
Oh, absolutely. The architectural and astronomical aspects are just as mind-bending. Its alignment to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, it's almost perfect.
How perfect?
We're talking less than 1/10 of a degree deviation from true north. Achieving that kind of accuracy without modern surveying equipment, well, it's a major question mark.
And then there are those claims about math hidden in the design, like pi and the golden ratio.
Yeah, those are fascinating, though sometimes debated in how they're calculated or interpreted. But the idea is that fundamental mathematical constants like phi, about 1.618, and pi, seem to be encoded in its proportions, its height-to-base ratio, that sort of thing.
Suggesting it wasn't just thrown together, it was designed with a deep understanding of geometry.
Precisely. And some research even connects this precision to more esoteric ideas, like aligning with what some call planetary energy fields.
Okay, what does that mean? Like lightly lines or something?
That's sort of along those lines, yeah. The theory suggests the pyramid might have been intentionally placed and oriented to interact with the Earth's natural energy currents, maybe telluric currents or geomagnetic lines, almost like it's tuned to the planet itself.
A giant stone antenna, maybe?
That's one way to think about it, yeah, a focal point for Earth's energies.
Okay, so massive, incredibly old, precisely built, supposedly a tomb. But here's the big sticking point, isn't it? The central mystery.
The big one, yeah. For all its grandeur, supposedly as Khufu's final resting place, it's basically empty.
No mummy ever found inside the main chambers.
Nope. No inscriptions like you see in the Valley of the Kings detailing the pharaoh's life or journey to the afterlife. No obvious burial markings in those core chambers, the kings and queens chambers.
Compared to later tombs, it's just stark, vast, precise, and empty.
Which, understandably, fuels all sorts of alternative theories. If it wasn't a tomb, what was it?
But what's the mainstream counter-argument to that emptiness?
It's pretty straightforward, really. Tomb robbers.
Ah, so it was a tomb, But everything valuable, including the body, was stolen centuries ago.
Exactly. That's the standard Egyptological explanation. Ancient Egypt had tomb robbing practically down to an art form. These pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid, would have been irresistible targets for millennia.
So the lack of stuff inside isn't proof it wasn't a tomb, it's proof it was successfully robbed.
That's the argument. And they point out that stone sarcophagi are found in some pyramids, including the granite box in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, and while the Giza pyramids lack the detailed funerary texts seen later.
Like the Book of the Dead.
Well, earlier versions, the pyramid texts, those do appear in pyramids built after Giza, which suggests the primary purpose was funerary, even if the style and content evolved.
Okay, so we have this fundamental tension. Was it a tomb, albeit a plundered one, or was it something else entirely? Maybe, as some suggest, a kind of machine in stone.
That's the core question that keeps people fascinated. Tomb or machine, monument or device.
And that's where we dive into the more unconventional ideas.
Yeah.
The fringe theories. Hidden tech, forgotten power.
Right, let's explore those because they are compelling even if they challenge the mainstream view.
First up, the idea of the pyramid as a power plant. This is Christopher Dunn's big theory, right?
Yes, exactly. Christopher Dunn, he's an engineer who looked at the pyramid not as an archaeologist, but through the lens of manufacturing and precision engineering.
And what did he see?
He saw features that, to him, looked less like tomb architecture and more like functional components of a machine. The extreme precision of the stonework, especially the internal granite structures like the king's chamber.
Granite's important. Why? Quartz content.
Right. Granite is rich in quartz crystals, which exhibit piezoelectric properties, meaning they generate an electric charge when put under mechanical stress.
Okay.
Dunn theorized that the pyramid's design, potentially using underground water channels beneath Giza to create vibrations or pressure changes, hydraulic ram pump effect maybe, could have induced vibrations in the pyramid's structure.
Making the granite chambers resonate.
Exactly. Resonate and potentially generate energy. He suggested the shafts weren't just for ventilation or symbolic passages, but maybe waveguides or conduits. The whole structure, in his view, could have been a massive harmonic resonator, tapping into Earth's vibrations to produce possibly wireless energy.
Wireless energy in ancient Egypt. That's a huge leap.
It is a huge leap. But what's fascinating is how some very recent discoveries seem to, well, maybe not prove done right, but certainly add intriguing context.
You mean those radar scans we mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
From 2025?
Yes. The team using that advanced satellite radar reported finding extensive structures beneath the pyramids, including those deep vertical shafts and what they called massive resonant chambers.
Resonant chambers. That sounds very Dunn-esque.
It does, doesn't it? The research team themselves noted these subterranean structures strongly correlate with models for energy production. They speculated the shafts could be conduits for energy or maybe water or air, and the huge cubic rooms below might function like stabilizers or capacitors.
So modern science is finding underground structures that seem to fit, at least conceptually, with an energy-generating model.
It's a potential correlation, yes. It's still early days for interpreting those radar scans and needs verification, but the shapes and layout they described are certainly suggestive and resonate with Dunn's ideas.
It makes you think about Nikola Tesla, too. Wasn't he fascinated by pyramids?
He was. Tesla, the genius of electrical engineering, had revolutionary ideas about wireless energy transmission, and his designs, particularly for his Wardenclyffe Tower, seemed to echo pyramid forms.
His 1905 patent.
Right, the art of transmitting electrical energy through the natural medium. It described using the Earth itself and the ionosphere to transmit power wirelessly. He envisioned triangle-shaped generators. Did he draw inspiration from the Great Pyramid? It's certainly possible he saw something in its design principles.
And he had that famous quote,
"The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." It makes you wonder if he believed ancient cultures had tapped into something we've forgotten.
Okay, another really challenging theory tackles how the blocks were even put there. The geopolymer hypothesis. What's that about?
This one challenges the most fundamental assumption, that the blocks were carved and hauled. Instead, proponents like Joseph Davidovits, a material scientist, argue they were poured in place.
Poured, like concrete.
Essentially, yes. A kind of advanced ancient concrete or geopolymer made from locally available materials, limestone slurry, binders like kaolin clay, natron salt, lime. They suggest the Egyptians had a lost recipe for creating high-quality artificial stone.
What's the evidence for that? Can you tell by looking at the blocks?
Not easily with the naked eye, but electron microscopy tells a different story. Analyses of samples from Khufu's pyramid, both outer casing and inner blocks, revealed microstructures that look very different from natural quarry stone.
How so?
They found minerals and elements mixed in ways that don't typically occur in natural limestone, like specific ratios of magnesium, silicon, oxygen, calcium, plus things like opal CT fibers. Some samples even contained trapped air bubbles and organic fibers, suggestive of a cast material that hardened quickly.
So it's like finding the chemical signature of concrete instead of quarried rock.
That's the argument. It would solve a lot of logistical problems. Moving 80-ton blocks becomes much easier if you're moving buckets of slurry up ramps instead, but it's still highly controversial within mainstream Egyptology.
Controversial, but interesting. What about sound? There are stories about weird acoustics inside, right?
Yes, particularly in the king's chamber. People have reported strange resonant frequencies, a low humming sound. Instruments have measured unusual acoustic properties.
Leading to the idea of it being a resonance machine.
Exactly. Some research focuses on specific frequencies like C-sharp and F-sharp, claiming they are fundamental to the pyramid's design and perhaps even linked to human consciousness or DNA resonance. There's this idea that the pyramid was built to interact with sound, maybe even amplify it for specific purposes, ritualistic, energetic, who knows?
And didn't some studies show it interacting with electromagnetic waves too?
Yes, relatively recent physics studies, published around 2018, used computational modeling. They showed that the Great Pyramid, if hit by external radio waves of certain wavelengths, around 200 to 600 meters, naturally focuses that electromagnetic energy into its internal chambers, particularly beneath the base.
Like a giant focusing lens for radio waves.
In a way, yes. It suggests the pyramid's shape and material properties have inherent electromagnetic concentrating abilities, whether intentional or not.
And then there's the whole liquid mercury thing. That sounds really strange. Is there mercury at Giza?
We don't have confirmed findings of large quantities of liquid mercury at Giza, but it has been found in significant amounts under other ancient pyramids, particularly in Mesoamerica, like at Teotihuacan in Mexico.
The mercury underworld. Why? What was it for?
Nobody knows for sure. Theories range from symbolic representations of sacred rivers or lakes in the underworld to perhaps having some unknown technological function related to conductivity or energy. The fact that this unusual feature appears in pyramid complexes continents apart raises questions about shared ancient knowledge or practices.
So all these fringe ideas, power plant, poured blocks, resonance, maybe even weird materials like mercury, they all point towards a purpose far beyond just a tomb.
They do. They culminate in this really provocative question. Was the Great Pyramid deliberately designed, tuned almost, to resonate with the Earth itself? To interact with planetary energy fields in a way we just don't understand anymore?
Which leads us into even stranger territory. Stargates and ancient aliens.
Buckle up. Yes, this is where the speculation really takes off. The idea that the pyramid isn't just a machine, but maybe a portal.
A Stargate. Like, literally.
In some interpretations, yes. The theory posits that the pyramid, perhaps activated by those specific sound frequencies or electromagnetic fields we just talked about, could function as a dimensional gateway.
A way to travel between worlds or dimensions.
Or perhaps a site for profound consciousness shifts. The king's chamber, again, is often singled out. Its unique construction, the granite box. Some believe it was a place for initiation rites that induced altered states, maybe even facilitating out-of-body experiences or contact with other realities.
Is there anything in actual Egyptian texts that hints at this kind of stuff?
Well, this is where interpretations get really interesting. Our research looked into the pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings in the world, inscribed inside later pyramids.
Do they mention Stargates?
They use evocative language. Book V, hymn 665759, mentions Stargates and describes the ascension of the pharaoh. It talks about the pharaoh ascending as the eye of the higher self sun, becoming a star, as the god of the morning star.
So, becoming a celestial being.
It sounds like it. The texts describe reaching a state called samadhi, a kind of transcendent consciousness, reaching a great staircase to heaven. The transformed pharaoh becomes chief of the living, directing the imperishable stars, the circumpolar stars that never set.
Wow. And what about vibration? You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, the texts emphasize vibration and movement as crucial to this transformation, linking the physical and the metaphysical. It's easy to see how someone could interpret this as needing specific frequencies or energies perhaps generated by the pyramid itself to achieve this ascension or travel.
And that ties into the Orion correlation theory too, doesn't it?
It does. Robert Bauval's theory suggests the layout of the three Giza pyramids mirrors the stars of Orion's belt. While mainstream Egyptology often dismisses this as coincidence or selective interpretation, others see it as profound. Meaning the alignment wasn't just symbolic, but perhaps a map, a return path to the stars, indicating the pharaoh's destination or origin. For some, it's another pointer towards an extraterrestrial connection.
Which brings us directly to the ancient astronaut proponents. Erich von Däniken, Zecharia Sitchin.
Exactly. Their core argument is pretty simple. Look at these massive, incredibly precise ancient structures like the pyramids or Pumapunku or Sacsayhuaman. Could ancient people with supposedly primitive tools and knowledge really have built these?
Their answer being no.
Their answer being no. Therefore, they conclude extraterrestrial intelligence must have been involved. Either aliens built these structures directly, or they gave ancient humans advanced technology and knowledge. These monuments become out-of-place artifacts, things that just don't fit the accepted timeline of human technological development.
Sitchin had a very specific story, didn't he, based on Sumerian text?
Oh, very specific. Sitchin claimed his translations revealed that beings called the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru about 400,000 years ago.
Why?
To mine gold. Apparently, Nibiru's atmosphere was failing, and they needed gold particles to repair it. Earth was rich in gold.
Okay.
But the Anunnaki workers got tired of the mining, so using genetic engineering, they created Homo sapiens, basically the Adapa or Adam, as slave laborers.
So humans were created by aliens to mine gold.
According to Sitchin's interpretation, yes. He claimed these Anunnakis were the basis for the gods of ancient pantheons, and even reinterpreted biblical stories through this lens. God and Satan become rival Anunnaki leaders. Original sin involves Anunnaki mating with early humans. The Great Flood was an Anunnaki decision. It's a whole alternative history.
That is quite a narrative. And proponents use artwork as evidence, too, claiming to see UFOs.
Yes, that's another common trope. They point to certain medieval and Renaissance paintings. There's one, the Madonna con Bambino i San Giovannino, with a weird blob in the sky that some say looks like a classic flying saucer.
I think I've seen that one.
And Carlo Crivelli's Annunciazione, which has a beam of light hitting Mary, originating from a disc-like object. Or Bonaventura Salimbeni's Santissima Trinita, showing God and Jesus holding rods connected to a sphere that looks uncannily like Sputnik.
Seriously, Sputnik.
It really does look like it. And Maslina da Panicale's Miracolo della Neve has multiple disc-shaped objects in the sky. The argument is, see, artists were depicting real UFOs they witnessed.
But what do art historians say? They must have explanations.
They do, and they're usually grounded in the symbolism and conventions of the time. The saucer in the Madonna painting is typically interpreted as a radiant cloud, nimbus, signifying divine presence. Crivelli's disc is seen as a vortex of angels within a divine light beam. The Sputnik is a globus cruciger, a sphere representing the universe or creation, common religious iconography. And the objects in Miracolo della Neve are usually explained as stylized depictions of clouds, specifically lenticular clouds, which can look disc-shaped.
So religious symbols and weird clouds, not flying saucers.
That's the mainstream art historical take, yes. Context is everything.
And these ancient alien theories, Sitchin's work especially, face a lot of academic criticism, right? They're often called pseudo-archaeology.
They are. The criticism is pretty harsh. For Sitchin specifically, scholars of Sumerian and Mesopotamian languages argue his translations are deeply flawed, often inconsistent with established cuneiform dictionaries, and that he takes texts out of context to fit his narrative.
So the foundation is shaky.
According to mainstream linguists and historians, yes, very shaky. More broadly, critics argue that pseudo-archaeology often dismisses the real ingenuity and hard work of ancient peoples, particularly non-European cultures.
How so?
By attributing their greatest achievements, like the pyramids, to aliens or lost white races, like Atlanteans, it subtly undermines the capabilities of indigenous populations. Some critics argue this can feed into narratives that try to rewrite history, denying credit where it's due. It discounts incredible human effort and intelligence.
Okay, that's a really important counterpoint, which brings us back to the mainstream view. What does conventional Egyptology say definitively about who built the Great Pyramid and when?
The consensus is firm. Pharaoh Khufu, 4th dynasty, around 2560 BCE.
Based on
a convergence of evidence. We already mentioned the Wadi el-Jarf papyri, Merer's logbook, which is incredibly strong direct evidence linking the construction to Khufu's reign.
Right, the project manager's diary.
Exactly, but there's much more. There's archaeological proof all over the Giza Plateau. Graffiti left by the work crews on hidden blocks inside the pyramid and other structures.
What kind of graffiti?
Quarry marks and crew names, often referencing the pharaoh. Things like the gang, Friends of Khufu, or the gang, Drunkards of Menkar, Menkar being a later pyramid builder at Giza. These sound like team names, giving us a human connection.
And they found where these workers lived.
Yes, extensive remains of a large settlement near the pyramids. It's often called the worker city or lost city of the pyramid builders. They've found bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily, fish processing areas, barracks-like housing, even evidence of medical care skeletons show bones that were set and healed.
So these weren't slaves being whipped.
The evidence points strongly away from the old Hollywood image of slaves. These appear to have been skilled Egyptian laborers, likely conscripted for part of the year, maybe during the Nile flood when farming wasn't possible, well-fed, organized, and even buried with honor in tombs near the pyramids. Finding their cemetery was a major discovery.
It paints a picture of a massive, state-organized project using Egyptian manpower. How organized were they?
Incredibly organized. Our research suggests the workforce was structured hierarchically. Large crews of maybe 2,000 men divided into 2 gangs of 1,000. Each gang split into 5 smaller groups of 200 called a za or file, like a division or battalion.
And these files had names, like the Friends of Khufu.
Exactly. And even those were broken down into smaller teams of perhaps 20 men. This allowed for efficient management, task allocation, and probably fostered some healthy competition between crews. It shows sophisticated project management skills.
What about actually moving the stones? We talked about the weight, the papyri shed light on that.
They do. Mira's logbook gives details on transport dates, the overseers involved, moving limestone blocks from the Tura quarries across the river, probably via canals dug to bring boats closer to the plateau than storage, and finally dragging them up ramps to the pyramid itself.
Dragging? How? Sledges? Rollers? Water?
Probably large wooden sledges moving over prepared surfaces. Some tomb paintings show workers pouring water in front of sledges to reduce friction on sand. The papyri also mention herdsmen, suggesting oxen were likely used to help haul the heaviest blocks on level ground. It was a combination of immense manpower, leverage, ramps, and likely animal assistance.
And they planned all this out. They didn't just wing it.
Definitely not. We have evidence of architectural planning. Miniature models of pyramids have been found, like a limestone model for a later pyramid at Awara. This shows they used scale models to work out design issues.
And the math. You mentioned the Rhind papyrus.
Yes, that text shows how they calculated the slope or angle of the pyramid's face. They had a practical system using ratios, rise over run essentially, to ensure consistency and precision. It wasn't alien math, it was clever Egyptian geometry.
Okay, but what about the incredible precision of the outer casing stones? They fit together so tightly. How does that square with, human labor and relatively simple tools?
That's where the slop factor comes in, which is actually really interesting evidence for human construction.
Slop factor, meaning it wasn't all perfect.
Exactly. While the outer casing stones, most of which are gone now, stripped for other buildings, and the stones lining the main chambers were incredibly precise, the vast majority of the pyramid's interior, the core, is much rougher.
How rough?
Less finely dressed blocks, bigger gaps between them, filled with rough chunks of stone, pebbles, gypsum mortar, even construction debris. It shows they focused the painstaking precision where it mattered visually and structurally, like the chambers, but used a more efficient, good enough approach for the bulk of the hidden core.
So smart resource allocation, not uniform alien perfection.
Precisely. It looks like human builders making practical decisions on a monumental scale.
So how does mainstream Egyptology counter the core arguments of the fringe theories, like the advanced knowledge argument?
They argue that advanced is relative. Yes, the Egyptians had sophisticated knowledge of engineering, math, astronomy, and logistics for their time, developed over centuries, but that doesn't automatically mean aliens gave it to them. It's a testament to human ingenuity and collective effort over generations.
And the emptiness being proof it wasn't a tomb.
Again, tomb robbery. It's the most parsimonious explanation, consisting with historical accounts and evidence from other plundered tombs. The pyramids were just too tempting.
There seems to be a strong critique of how pseudo-archaeology operates too.
Yes, scholars often criticize it for starting with a conclusion, aliens built it, and then selectively seeking evidence to fit while ignoring contradictory data. They often attack uncertainty in mainstream research as proof the experts are wrong, rather than acknowledging that science is a process of refinement. Zahi Hawass, the former head of Egyptian antiquities, often says things like,
I remember his quote, "People like to dream."
"But you have to know a little bit about reality." It highlights the tension between popular imagination and the demands of evidence-based research.
Still, even with all this evidence, you said earlier that mainstream Egyptology doesn't have all the answers, right? There's still lingering questions.
Absolutely. Even within the conventional framework, there are details about the construction that are still debated. The exact configuration of the ramps used to get the stones to the top, for instance. How they achieved that final level of precision on the largest blocks. These aren't mysteries that demand alien intervention, but they are genuine questions that keep researchers digging. And that uncertainty is where alternative ideas find room to grow.
Which brings us neatly to the latest phase. Hidden chambers and modern discoveries using new technology.
Right. We're moving beyond just theory and looking at actual recent findings that are potentially adding new layers to the pyramid story.
Let's go back to those robots.
Okay.
Alpwat 2 in '93 finding that first door in the Queen's chamber shaft.
Yes, Gantenbrink's robot. That discovery was huge. A sealed door, untouched for millennia, deep inside a tiny shaft. It sparked immense speculation what was behind it.
And later robots went further.
They did. National Geographic drilled a small hole through that first door in 2002 and found another small chamber and a second door, rougher looking. Then the Jedi Project in 2010 used a more flexible micro-snake camera, got a better look past the first door, saw the back of it was finished, and even spotted some small red hieratic symbols painted on the floor of that little chamber. Possibly Mason's marks or numbers.
Still no giant treasure room then.
No, but proof that these shafts weren't just simple air vents and that there were deliberately sealed spaces inside. It keeps the mystery alive.
But robots can only go down existing shafts. What about finding completely hidden spaces? That's where the muonscans came in.
Exactly. The Scan Pyramids project, starting around 2016, they used muon tomography, which is just fascinating science.
Explain it again simply. Cosmic rays.
Right. Cosmic rays hit the upper atmosphere, creating a shower of particles, including muons. Muons are like heavy electrons, and they rain down constantly, passing through almost everything.
But they pass through empty space differently than solid rock.
Precisely. By placing detectors around and even inside the pyramid, scientists can track the paths and numbers of muons coming through from different directions. If fewer muons arrive from one direction than expected, it means they pass through denser material, solid stone. If more muons arrive, it suggests they pass through a void, an area of lower density.
Like a hidden chamber.
Exactly. It allows you to map density variations inside the pyramid without drilling a single hole. You can potentially spot cavities as small as, a tiny fraction of the pyramid's volume.
Yeah, they found something significant.
They found two major anomalies. One was a smaller cavity near the pyramid's north face, its purpose unknown. But the big one was the Scan Pyramid's big void.
How big?
Huge. Located above the Grand Gallery, it's estimated to be at least 30 meters, about 100 feet long, with a cross-section similar to the Grand Gallery itself. Some compared its volume to that of a 200-seat airliner.
Wow. And what's in it? Do we know?
We don't. The muon scans can detect the void, but not tell us what's inside or why it's there. Is it one large space, a series of smaller ones, a structural feature to relieve pressure above the Grand Gallery, a hidden chamber intentionally sealed? We still don't know.
So muon scans look inside the pyramid structure, but those recent radar discoveries you mentioned, they looked underneath it.
Yes, this is the work by Malanga, Biondi, May, and their team, announced in 2025. They used a different technology, satellite synthetic aperture radar, or SAR.
How does SAR work for looking underground from space? That sounds like science fiction.
It's incredibly advanced. It essentially uses radar pulses from a satellite, but instead of just measuring reflections, it analyzes tiny changes in the radar signals phase caused by micro vibrations on the ground surface. These vibrations are influenced by the density and structure of the materials beneath the surface. By processing these subtle phase modulations, they can build up a high-resolution 3D image of subsurface structures. They called it capturing the vibrational signature.
Okay, so it's reading the echoes of underground structures through tiny ground vibrations.
That's a good way to put it. And the structures they reported finding beneath the Giza Plateau, particularly under Khufu's pyramid, are just staggering if they're confirmed.
Remind us what they claim to find.
Okay, first, 5 near-base chambers, apparently identical, just below Khufu's base. Large rooms, tens of meters across, with multiple levels, sloping roofs, connected by geometric passages.
Comparable to the king's chamber in size.
That's what they suggested, yes. But that was just the beginning. Deeper
Yes,
down.
shafts.
8 huge cylindrical vertical well shafts, apparently hollow, arranged in 2 rows, each surrounded by a carved descending spiral pathway going down into the bedrock.
And how deep did these go?
An astonishing 648 meters,
Whoa.
over 2,100 feet straight down.
That depth is just almost unbelievable for ancient construction.
It really pushes the boundaries of what we thought was possible, and at the bottom of these shafts,
The big cubes.
2 massive cubic cavities, roughly 80 meters on a side by side, seemingly connected to the shaft system.
And connecting everything.
An extensive tunnels network, stretching horizontally for about 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, linking areas beneath all 3 main Giza pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. They described it as a multi-level complex reaching from near the surface down over 600 meters.
So if this is real, it's not just a few hidden rooms. It's an entire, vast, interconnected subterranean world beneath Giza.
That's the implication, a coherent complex on a scale never previously imagined.
How did the researchers interpret this? If it's not tombs, what?
Well, given the apparent lack of burial evidence in their scans, they questioned the sole funerary purpose. They suggested maybe it was part of a giant energy machine, echoing Dunn's ideas. The shafts as conduits, maybe acoustic or vibrational amplifiers using Earth as energy. The cubes as capacitors or buffers.
Or ceremonial spaces?
Or a massive ceremonial complex for initiations or secret rites performed deep underground. Or maybe repositories for lost knowledge or artifacts. Basically, hubs of activity far more complex than just burial preparation.
And that temporal gateway tagline, where did that come from?
That seemed to be a more speculative leap, suggesting the findings might have implications for understanding time, maybe ancient cycles or knowledge transfer across epochs. It was definitely the most headline-grabbing and perhaps most criticized part of their announcement, venturing far beyond the direct radar evidence.
Understandably drawing skepticism. What has been the reaction from mainstream Egyptology? Have they rushed to verify this?
Not exactly rushed. The reaction has been largely skeptical, or at least cautious, pending verification. There's been no official endorsement from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities.
Why the skepticism? What are the main objections?
Several key points. 1. Lack of ground truthing. Radar data is an interpretation. Until someone drills a hole or sends a camera down to physically confirm these structures exist as described, it remains an anomaly detected by one specific novel technique. And getting permission for that kind of invasive work at Giza is extremely difficult.
Decades of restrictions, right?
Exactly. 2, the potential contradiction with the earlier muonscans. Why didn't scan pyramids detect hints of this massive network under Khufu, even if it was focused higher up? Although, as we noted, the SAR probed much deeper subsoil, so maybe they wouldn't overlap perfectly.
And the sheer scale of the claim?
That's the third point. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. One research group using one novel technique isn't enough to rewrite the map of Giza. Academics want independent replication by other teams, ideally using different methods like gravimetry, measuring tiny gravity variations, or seismic surveys, before accepting this as fact.
Plus the internal dynamics of archaeology. You mentioned it can be slow to adopt new tech.
Sometimes, yes. Archaeology is a field steeped in tradition. Integrating cutting-edge tech from physics or remote sensing can face hurdles, methodology debates, funding issues, sometimes even professional rivalries or ego, as the researchers themselves hinted. It takes time for truly disruptive findings to be vetted and accepted.
So we have these potentially revolutionary discoveries, but they're caught in a waiting game for verification, facing both scientific rigor and maybe some institutional inertia.
That sums it up pretty well. The potential is immense, but the proof isn't quite there yet for the mainstream.
Okay, as we wrap up this journey through millennia of mystery and cutting-edge science, let's just reflect. What is the Great Pyramid? Could it be all of the above?
It's increasingly tempting to think it wasn't just one thing. Maybe it served multiple purposes. A symbolic tomb? Yes, perhaps for the pharaoh's ka or spirit, even if the physical body wasn't ultimately interred there or was robbed.
But also maybe a resonator.
Yeah.
A place designed to interact with energy, sound, or even consciousness.
Possibly. The precision, the materials, the specific chambers, they invite that kind of speculation, and certainly it was and is an enduring cosmic symbol. Its very shape, pointing to the heavens aligned with the stars, it speaks a language beyond just burial.
Those pyramid texts, descriptions of ascension, transforming into a light body, achieving ocean awareness meditation, becoming chief of the living. It sounds less like burial rites and more like a manual for spiritual transformation.
It really does. The texts talk about purification, rejuvenation, achieving a divine state. Could the pyramid have been a technological and spiritual device to facilitate that kind of profound inner journey?
And the idea of it as an encoded structure, a memory palace built to last.
That's another fascinating concept. Not just a monument, but a library of information encoded in its geometry, its alignments, maybe even its resonant frequencies. Like ancient cultures used constellations to store myths and knowledge, perhaps the pyramid itself is a repository designed to communicate across vast stretches of time.
A stable message waiting for a civilization capable of decoding it.
Perhaps. Those esoteric interpretations of the pyramid texts, seeing them as meditation code for clearing energy blockages, earth trembles for you, invoking transcendent awareness, referencing the cosmic kundalini cobra goddess Nekabet. It suggests a deep, sophisticated system of inner knowledge might be linked to the pyramid's function.
Tantric techniques in ancient Egypt, wow.
It points to a potentially hidden layer of meaning and practice far removed from simple tomb functions.
So, the discoveries continue. If those radar findings are eventually verified, confirming that hidden world beneath the sands,
It would be paradigm shifting. It would prove a whole chapter of history, a level of ancient engineering, and perhaps purpose that we simply didn't know existed. It opens up entirely new questions about who built it, why, and what else might still be hidden.
which leads us right back to that fundamental point of mystery, and our final question for you listening. If the Great Pyramid still holds secrets, are we ready for what they reveal? That's it for this journey beyond the known. If the unknown calls to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. There's so much more waiting to be discovered.